Serious hello scientists of Reddit. What's a scary science fact that the public knows nothing about? Story 1 Attention. Serious tag notice jokes, puns, and off-topic comments are not permitted in any comment, parent or child. Parent comments that aren't from the target group will be removed, along with their child replies. Report comments that violate these rules. Posts that have few relevant answers within the first hour, and posts that are not appropriate for the serious tag will be removed. Consider doing an AMA request instead. Thanks for your cooperation and enjoy the discussion. I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit message compose. AskReddit if you have any questions or concerns. Story 2 Scientific literature conclusion on Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases in general is that the diseases start decades before the first obvious symptoms and that we need to treat them at this stage. When you exhibit obvious symptoms, it's too late, your brain is already mush. If you get diagnosed with Alzheimer's at 65, you had the disease since your early 40s at least, and you experienced very mild symptoms but didn't notice it, and your brain fought like to compensate the deficit. When you get diagnosed, your brain is already very severely damaged and will never recover from the deficit. Story 3 If your dog swims in a lake after receiving a spot on flea treatment, it absolutely decimates the invertebrate population. A large dog swimming in 8 Olympic swimming pools worth of water soon after treatment will leach enough neurotoxin to kill 50 of the lake's invertebrate population within 48 hours. There's some awareness of this, but it's not being taken seriously enough. Edit I need to add. When I say after I mean relatively soon after, within say a day, to have an effect quite this devastating. The leaching does reduce over the month, but it's still there and the effect of multiple dogs still allows for a terrible buildup of chemicals. Story 4 Prion, misfolded proteins that cause a cascade of protein misfoldings that lead to amyloid plaque buildups, resulting in uncontrollable neurodegeneration that is fatal in 100 of cases within 2 years. There is no cure, we don't understand what causes it, we don't understand the mechanism of the misfolding cascade. We don't even fully understand the structure of the misfolded proteins. It could in theory happen to anyone, at any time, and there's no way to tell until you start showing symptoms, at which point you might have 18 months to live, if you're lucky, the last 6 of which will be intensely unpleasant. Story 5 Coronavirus COVID-19 was not surprising nor unexpected by people working in public health, and it's not the worst-case scenario by any means. Ironically, the success of public health has been so dramatic over the past 150 years that politicians and the general public forget how important it is, and how much authority government officials have in a public health crisis. Story 6 Despite what advertising tells you, it's really hard to claim that something is scientifically proven. Why? Proving causality is complicated and expensive. Story 7 Antibiotics has been abused and misused for so long that various bacteria strains have started to get resistance to them. What used to be a treatable infection might soon become deadly because we are unable to treat it with the antibiotics we have today. There is research to try and find other ways to treat antibiotic-resistant bacteria, but until then, please use prescribed antibiotics until they are finished, not until you feel better. If unstood, do not flush them down the toilet or put them in the bin. Give it to a pharmacy so they can discard them correctly, and use antibiotics when necessary. Some countries give them willy-nilly while others are more conservative. Story 8 Everyone knows about scurvy, but the reason it's so terrifying is usually less known. You see, scar tissue is not permanent. The process to build and maintain scar tissue is constantly ongoing. When you become vitamin C deficient, your scar tissue starts being reabsorbed by your body, opening up any and all old wounds. If you have ever had surgery, those internal incisions will open back up. Fortunately, it doesn't take a lot of vitamin C and it's abundant in our food sources, but it's still a little creepy that you could just start falling apart without it. Edit FYI, too much vitamin C can lead to stomach cancer. Vitamin C is basically citric acid, so eating a ton of acid regularly is bad. Edit 2 Citric acid is not vitamin C, but is closely related, and is actually ascorbic acid. Story 9 Helium, fun for party balloons. Everybody likes a squeaky voice, except helium is a vital component of various high-tech devices such as MRIs. Helium is also light enough that the Earth's gravity cannot contain it, and we are running out. Not today, not tomorrow, but we are frivolously wasting it when we should be jealously hoarding it, and eventually we won't have any left, and a lot of our wonderful technology will suddenly stop working. Story 10 There is a gravitational anomaly in space called the Great Attractor, which is pulling everything within the Virgo and Hydra Centaurus superclusters towards it. It lies 150 to 250 million light-years from the Milky Way, which itself is being pulled towards it too. The scary part is that relative to us, this anomaly lies within the same plane as our own galaxy, making it very difficult to observe. Essentially, we have almost no concrete idea of what it is. Story 11 If you live in the Netherlands and your house is older than let's say 100 years and you have not renovated your plumbing, chances are fairly high that you can get lead poisoning. It is impossible for water treatment companies to pinpoint where they are and how many, and many building plans do not include the plumbing schematics. So check your pipes for lead, they can do harm, especially to children. Story 12 The entire explosive output from Little Boy, the nuclear bomb dropped on Hiroshima, came from just over half a gram of matter being converted into energy, the mass of a butterfly exploding with a force of 15,000 tons of TNT. Story 13 Cancer geneticist here. Most cases of cancer that are sequenced generally just denote the prognosis or how long a patient has to live, rather than treatment options. People always say let's cure cancer, however this simplifies cancer as though it is only one disease. It's far more complicated than that. I studied at one of the largest cancer hospitals in the world where the motto is to make cancer history, but the only obtainable goal is to make it chronic. We study and research as much as possible, but every cancer requires different research, and unfortunately the powers that be often prohibit funding and proficient research. It's work I am passionate about, but also a broken system that is infuriating to work in. Story 14 During WW2 when America was working on the first nuclear bombs, they hadn't finalized the maths on whether or not a nuclear explosion would cause an ongoing reaction with the atmosphere, thereby igniting it and eradicating Earth. Story 15 There is a forest of trees that are all genetically identical and connected at the roots, and is considered the largest organism on Earth. I'm pretty sure it was the inspiration behind Ava in Avatar. Story 16 In the UK, about 17 of people have fetal alcohol syndrome. Maguire et al., 1992. As much as 17 of us are developmentally disabled simply because, prior to the late 90s, a large proportion of British mothers drank during pregnancy. 41. Thankfully the prevalence rate has been falling fast since the late 90s when all this research was published, but it's terrifying to see how much of an effect FASD is having on society. Story 17 A repeat of an earlier post, but does it fit so well? The original nuclear bombs leveled the cities they detonated over, yet are considered puny by today's standards. The most powerful nuclear bomb ever created, the Tsar Bomba, had an explosive yield 3,000 times more powerful than the original nuclear bombs, and its power was calculated to be more than 10 times the combined power of every single munition used in WW2. That includes every bullet fired, every grenade thrown, every artillery shell fired, every bomb dropped, and of course the 2 nuclear bombs dropped. It was detonated 4 kilometers from the ground over the remote Severny Island, yet still completely destroyed towns within a couple hundred kilometers of the blast and broke windows as far away as Copenhagen, Denmark. The shockwave from the blast circled the globe 9 times. The plane that dropped it was given a 5,050 chance of survival. Yet, the bomb was originally designed to be twice as powerful. Edited to add further clarification. Edit 2 Thanks for all the upvotes, folks. Story 18 Topsoil loss is pretty scary for the medium-long term. E.g., for a quick overview, this glosses over heterogeneity. E.g., we're burning through soil in the Midwest much faster than other parts of the U.S. Interestingly enough, a lot of the damage from the Dust Bowl is still in place, but we're relying on more input-intensive methods to eke out results. Fertilizer runoff is also causing a giant anoxic dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. The nutrients feed algae, which has a population explosion and rots en masse. Some are holding out for usable soil opening up at high latitudes, e.g. Canada, Siberia with climate change, but at least near term that isn't too promising given that it will generally be poorer soil, e.g. less phosphate, and melting permafrost won't be too reliable for quite a while. While vertical farming and the like is making advances, as I understand it most of what's practical to grow tends to be inefficient calorie-wise. Story 19 The human genome is riddled with mutations. Some are passed down from your parents. Some occur during DNA replication and others as a result of DNA damage from environment, smoking, UV light, etc. Most of these mutations are harmless. Some will be repaired, some won't, but others will be in cancer suppressor genes or oncogenes. In fact, you may have cancerous cells growing in your body right now. Story 20 Soil science adjacent researcher here. We are degrading, polluting, and losing our topsoil at such a rate that we may not be able to produce enough food to feed everyone within 50 to 60 years, let alone what impacts climate change may bring to bear on our food supply. And the US government's crop insurance programs and incentives all reinforce the bad practices, while discouraging regenerative practices. These bad policies are extremely hard to change because of lobbying from the major agribusiness companies, who make money off of these short-sighted policies. Our food supply is further threatened by our agricultural overdependence on aquifer water, which is not being replenished, making it an unsustainable source of water. If the aquifers are overdrawn, depleted, or polluted, we hit a hard wall of water scarcity, and we will have no backups to address the problem with. The drawdown of the aquifers also causes land subsidence, which causes costly infrastructure and building damage. The general public does not realize the impending crisis that will be caused by the confluence of these factors. Story 21 The Cascadia Subduction Zone CSZ runs off the coast of northern California to southern Canada and ruptures about every 250 to 350 years. We know this from the geologic record. The last rupture was in January 1700 and there are written records from Japan of a tsunami that resulted from the earthquake on the other side of the Pacific. This zone is still active and is likely to rupture in the next 100 years, resulting in a Mag 9 earthquake that impacts the west coast from northern Cali to southern Canada. These massive earthquakes along subduction zones are called megathrust earthquakes. Story 22 Smallpox is really easy to bring back and it'll kill 15 of the planet when it happens. Take some genocidal anger, knowledge tens of thousands have, and about 100k, hey race all the ways it could happen. 1 US or Russian stocks leaked or used as bioweapon. We keep some intentionally. It's very secure. This is unlikely IMHO. 2 accidentally bumped into at an old lab, leaked during cleaning or something, forgotten stock still occasionally found, leak spreading very unlikely IMHO, 3 intentional release via recreation, someone resynthesizes it from scratch via public sequence according to this paper with about 100K in materials. Methods difficulty identical to what is published here. It's totally possible, almost simple to do smallpox powder dropped in envelopes mailed around the world by a disgruntled underpaid PhD student C. Aurora, Colorado shooter. Outbreak is out of hand before it's noticed. Billions die. Story 23. I don't know if I'd call it science purse or call myself a scientist lol, but I'm a former funeral director, and one of the first things you learn in your actual funeral sciences classes is that people over a certain body fat percentage will start a literal grease fire in your crematory oven if you don't bake them at the proper temp and duration. Cold start, low and slow is key. Story 24. There's a solar event known as a CME or a coronal mass ejection. It occurs very frequently on a cosmic time scale. Every few decades to centuries there's a decent size one. Why are they scary? A CME is a massive burst of radiation, easily able to fully envelope the Earth in its path, and it's the equivalent of a non-stop EMP barrage. The last time a big one hit Earth was when we had telegraph lines for communications and they spontaneously caught fire. In today's world with everything running on electricity, when the next big one hits we'll have at most a few days warning, and it'd be a literal apocalypse movie scenario, with planes going down due to their whole electrical system frying, nobody's vehicle starting, untold billions in fire damage would wreak havoc everywhere, and the machines we depend on to help would be similarly fried. Some stuff would be unaffected, being parked in deep, concrete-roofed parking garages and the like, but our entire infrastructure would be useless for years. It'd literally send us into a mini dark age while people tried to get things working again. Recovery would take decades to centuries. Story 25. The mortality rate of COVID-19 is much talked about with lots of different numbers thrown about, but with a few exceptions I think we can agree that it is less than 10, and less than half of that for healthy people. The typical mortality rate for the Marburg virus is 50, different variants can be as high as 80. We have known about this virus for many years, and yet there is still no vaccine. The only good news is that it is too effective at killing to reach pandemic levels. Story 26. Haven't seen this one yet. Insects are going extinct. We have lost a significant chunk just since the 80s. I think it was around 20. Mozzies are going up, because of course, but just about everything else is going. Wasn't until I read this that I realized that as a kid in the 90s I used to see butterflies all the time, dragonflies. My house used to get invaded by Christmas beetles every year. Not so much. These days I might see only 1 or 2 Christmas beetles in December, if any at all. When I was a kid I remember finding 8 in my house in a single night, same house. Story 27. If you look at how it works, it's not even biology as much as it's physics. An oddly shaped protein that, when it bumps into another protein, physically causes its shape to change in the same way. This deactivates what the protein was doing. Except now it's the same shape. ITLL bend other proteins the same way. It's near impossible to clean. Story 28. Most cosmetic items that say they contain ingredients like different plant extracts have just enough to say that it's in there, but not enough to actually help you, like a few grams in a batch that's a couple thousand gallons. If it isn't an FDA-regulated component like for example salicylic acid in a shampoo for people with dandruff, there is literally nothing stopping companies from putting virtually undetectable amounts of ingredients into stuff just to be able to say it's there. Story 29. Botox is made from botulinum toxin. This toxin is produced by the bacterium Clostridium botulinum, and is considered to be one of the most poisonous, lethal substances known to mankind. The toxin is a neurotoxin that blocks nerve signals to muscles. Consequently, it prevents muscles injected with Botox from contracting tensing, so they become weak or paralyzed, thus improving the appearance of wrinkles and fine lines. Fortunately though, Botox is only injected in small, targeted doses, and is considered extremely safe as long as it's made and provided by a licensed professional. Story 30. Humans rely on evaporating sweat to stay cool. If humidity gets too high, relatively low heat can kill humans. The equivalent of 95 F-35C at 100 relative humidity can kill even healthy humans. This is called a wet bulb event. By 2050, scientists predict multiple wet bulb events in the North China Plain. Approximately 400 million people live in the North China Plain. Story 31. A Carrington event could nearly end life in developed countries as we know it. With no warning, we could take steps to prevent the effects, but are completely unprepared today. Story 32. In Canada, there are many buildings under design for snow loads due to being designed under the previous revisions of the building code. Snow drift loading due to different height roofs, large RTUs, or solar panels, etc., were not factored into the design for the roof structures. A lot of jobs I work on tend to increase in scope after an analysis of the roof capacity is performed. Story 33. I keep wondering why so many people including in this post are scared of cosmic changes that might eradicate life, Earth and all existence in an instant, such as vacuum decay. Like, if it ever happens we will never know about it. We won't see it coming and we won't actively experience it or anything after, since when it happens it's already over. Aren't the scary things that you actually have to deal with, like lasting disease or social collapse, rather than an instant wipeout that doesn't really concern anyone anymore the moment it's done. Story 34. Our food is becoming less nutritious. Plants take in CO2 gas and convert that into carbohydrates through photosynthesis. The increase in atmospheric CO2 concentration we have caused means that plants are producing more carbohydrate sugars and structural carbs like cellulose. However, the mineral, micronutrient, and protein content of plants is not increasing. Plants today contain more carbs than plants 100 years ago generally. This may be a contributing factor to the obesity epidemic since more total calories need to be consumed in order to reach total nutrient requirements. This study looks at goldenrod, a North American weed, and the increasing carbohydrate to protein ratio they have found in goldenrod samples. Story 35. I've got 3 for you. 1. Rabies. 1. Symptomatic. Rabies has a 100 fatality rate. The only options are the rabies vaccine and immunoglobulin therapy, which, again, must be administered before any symptoms. 2. Gamma ray bursts, henceforth referred to as GRBs. GRBs are a rare phenomenon emitted from the poles of rapidly spinning supernovae and hypernovae. In the event of a direct hit from suitably close, which is actually really far, all life on Earth would be wiped out. The facing side would be annihilated instantly, while the trailing side would quickly die due to the conditions on Earth no longer being suitable to support life. And there is absolutely nothing we can do about it. Kurzgesagt. Video 3. Runaway global warming. There are many stores of greenhouse gases, namely carbon dioxide and methane, all over the place, but the conditions required to keep these gases trapped are delicate. The worst part, it may already be too late to stop, even if humanity immediately ceased all greenhouse gas emissions and put every single resource we have into carbon sequestration. Story 36. There's this phenomenon called cosmic horizon, I think, which says that due to the accelerating expansion of the universe, a curtain-like horizon closes in on us, making it unable to see anything beyond it, therefore making it impossible to ever get there or share information with the place beyond it. This will take place when none of us are here anymore, but the thought of event horizon like from a black hole closing in on this world and every part of the universe respectively makes me feel scared. I'm not 100% sure about the acceleration or deceleration regarding the expansion of the universe, but I think this would happen in either case. Story 37. Someday, all energy will be dispersed and literally nothing can happen. Time has lost all meaning because one moment is the same as the last, and it will stay like that forever. Story 38. The publicly known fact that climate emergency will do terrible damage, but not to us significantly, but our children massively, that those children will wish for their own demise, lest some major virus induced by the climate change shall be devastating for half of humanity. Story 39. The universe might be metastable, and at any moment a sphere of influence may spread. This can occur anywhere without warning. This sphere will spread, and inside it will literally rewrite all of physics and chemistry. This can make life impossible inside. Literally, an atom that is a part of you can do this at any time. Your dog can become a sphere of influence, your carpet, even the atmosphere, and there is absolutely no way to stop it. Story 40. Hey race, a few scary medical science facts regarding CPR that you won't often hear in your first aid per class put on in school. I only learned this stuff after schooling to become an EMT. What's the success rate of CPR? The average person assumes 75 or greater. In reality, it's barely 10. It's one of the first things they told us in training. Because all new people have way too high of an expectation to the effectiveness of CPR, it can be very depressing when you're doing everything you were trained, and aren't getting the results you think you should be getting. The time from collapse to administration of a shock via AED is absolutely paramount. They say the chances of survival drop 10 per minute. Oh, and rescue breaths. If you're not being very, and I mean very careful, you'll cause gastric dissension, you'll literally be blowing up their stomach, and they will vomit. Then there's the cracks and crackles. If done right, IDLL sound and feel like you're breaking every rib in little old lady Nelson's chest. You're likely not. It's cartilage and other bits shifting. Although if you're a bit too vigorous, you may very well break a rib or two, but hey, they're already dead, so it doesn't matter. They'd rather be alive with a broken rib than dead. Story 41. If the Riemann hypothesis is false, there exists a bias in the distribution of prime numbers. In layman's terms, the prime numbers do not appear randomly among the natural numbers, meaning that there is some sense or purpose behind numbers. Much of current mathematics, whose results depend on the Riemann hypothesis being true, will immediately collapse. Entire branches of knowledge, that we took for granted, will be falsified. Story 42. Physical oceanography. The world's climate is driven by the meridional overturning circulation, what you might have heard of as the global conveyor belt. Essentially, this is the formation of cold and salty deep water masses near the poles North Atlantic, Antarctica that sinks to the bottom of the oceans, that then upwells in regions like the Indian Ocean and the subtropical Pacific. No deep water formation, no upwelling. No deep water formation, no movement of heat on a large scale theoretically in the oceans. The heat capacity of the oceans is orders of magnitude greater than that of the atmosphere. If that heat isn't moving around, the world's climate rapidly changes. Thanks to the melting of the Greenland ice sheet, there's going to be a lot fresher water in the North Atlantic. No salty water, no deep water formation, no deep water formation, no conveyor belt, no conveyor belt, no Gulf Stream, or anything else driven by geostrophic motion. Climate apocalypse. Have fun. Story 43. It's not completely unknown but still scary AF. Approximately 1 in 2 people will get cancer. Look at your friends. Feel free to include yourself. Half of you will get cancer. Story 44 Helium makes up 24 of our universe but is non-renewable. We are running out of it for crucial industries on Earth because it keeps escaping our atmosphere. Story 45 As the sun ages it will expand, and eventually engulf the Earth, unstoppable and inescapable for the planet. I just hope that humanity isn't still confined to here when it happens. Story 46 The Clathrate gun hypothesis scares the out of me, basically methane trapped within ice, primarily under permafrost and on the ocean bottom. It's kinda like the supervolcano of climate change. Not likey but very bad if it happens. Methane is way worse than CO2 and more important it is faster acting, which could cause a runaway effect. But it's not likely for a number of reasons, including the stuff in the ocean is buried. Story 47 It's probably cliché now, and I'm sure covered in lots of other Reddit threads, but how many people are aware that by 6262021 yes next month, the military is supposed to release a report providing details as much as is known about unidentified aerial phenomenon UAP formerly UFOs. Having already acknowledged that several recent leaked videos are authentic and also supported by other military tech. By all accounts, these phenomena are seen and encountered regularly by military pilots and no one knows what they are, other than that they do not seem to be ours or China Russia's, and demonstrate technology far more advanced than anything available at present on Earth, and which seem to defy known laws of physics. Story 48 Priceless virgin forests are destroyed for toilet paper which can easily be made from sustainable sources like bamboo and hemp, half of the only habitat for Sumatran tigers, elephants, orangutans because there is not adequate legislature and oversight. Read this for information about the company's responsible app, Asian Pulp and Paper. Story 49 At any moment in time a rogue planet could fly by the solar system and eject Earth from its orbit. Us being further away from the galactic center makes this less likely, but it's still super scary. Edit planet would make more sense than star. Story 50 It's well known from overly flashy and ineffective chemistry classes that different materials burn with flames of different colors. Not all fire is orange or red. It's less well known that a hydrogen flame is invisible. Invisible fire just as hot, just as deadly, but you can't see it. Story 51 Farmers spraying crops with anhydrous ammonia. There's tanks of it on every highway. If one ruptured it would be a toxic fog that would kill you very painfully. Story 52 Current pandemic was only deadly to very few with like a 7 or lower. The fact is there are other viruses, millions of them confined to the animal world. These viruses could have a mortality rate as much as 60 to 90 which would sweep through knocking out much of the population, and quite possibly the people who could cure it would die. We see how it went with a minor death rate. Society would collapse quickly and chaos would envelope all nations. People with the ability to safeguard lock down nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction might die before they could do so. This would mean factions of not so stable and stable groups locally warring for resources and fresh water supplies. Even those who gather to peacefully share resources would have to dispense harsh penalties to contain and to ensure people follow the law. It would turn into our worst nightmare. Sorry for being so dark, but it is real. Story 53 There's a very real possibility that the next pandemic will occur in the next 10 to 20 years. From the way that things are going in the economic south of the word, it is possible that a new variant of the SARS-CoV-2 that is redistant to vaccines appears soon. There are more than enough resources in the planet to accommodate 10 by humans, but the resources are very badly distributed. Story 54 It only takes a virology lab or some kind of fake papers claiming you're running one, basic lab equipment and knowledge, a few months of time and less than 100,000 to fully reassemble the smallpox virus, or really just any kind of virus. Smallpox is actually not a super good bioweapon, but the scare factor would be huge. We would have a year of toilet paper shortage. With enough time, money, more knowledge and a bit of luck you could also combine e.g., the flu and corona and end up with very high mortality and infection efficiency. It's not super hard and creating new viruses is actually a pretty big part in research, so a lot of things are already established. Story 55 A particle found in the core of neutron stars can convert normal matter into what is called strange matter, and it can infect all matter in the universe because it can exist outside of neutron stars. A single particle is enough to change Earth into an unrecognizable planet, along us with it. Story 56 The government protocol for disposing of nuclear waste is to pack it with kitty litter in barrels and bury it. If the wrong brand of litter is used it can cause massive environmental problems. This mistake has been made before. Story 57 Botulism toxin the ones used in Botox injections is so potent something like 40 milligrams would be enough to kill everyone in the world. Also recent local event have brought to the forefront in my mind that rabies is very contagious and 100 deadly, and the only reason people aren't dying by the thousands is thanks to public health policies. Story 58 REM sleeping disorder. Diagnosed people move around a lot during sleep, especially in vivid dreams. Their muscles are no longer relaxed, people act on their dreams and violent behavior often occurs. The person himself or the bed neighbor can get seriously injured or in worst case even killed. The disorder is a significant predictor of Parkinson's disease. Story 59 The retina the part of your eye which receives light and allows you to see can unstick itself from the back of the eye without much provocation. It's pretty terrifying to think about. Story 60 DNA mutations occur quite frequently within the cells of our body, but usually the cells are killed off before further replication, preventing cancer. It is only when the mechanisms of killing cells with mutated DNA fail that cancer develops. Story 61. We've been able to map the entire brain and neuropathways, essentially making a map of ourselves. Consciousness in the cloud is not far away from reality. Story 62. The corpus callosum, a fiber matrix that connects the left and right hemisphere, is responsible for enabling fluid communication between language ability and spatial ability. However, once severed, either hemisphere essentially become independent of each other, leading to a sense of dual consciousness where the right brain controls the left side of the body and vice versa. The scary element is not simply that you're now controlled by two independent spheres, but that consciousness is a physical, tangible, and divisible part of you. Story 63. There are some destinations in space that are considered dead ends, where the expansion of the universe between you and them is so great that even traveling at light speed you'll never reach your destination. Worse, you can't turn back after a certain point either, because home is receding faster than you can fly to. You're just trapped in the endless void between two unreachable destinations, forever, and no one will ever be able to reach you for the exact same reason. Story 64. Well, I'm not a scientist, but I have an interesting one about the New Madrid Fault. In 1812, it faulted, causing the Mississippi to flow north for a short time. When there's an earthquake in that area that is substantial, it shakes the river plain. The river plain is more like jello than solid land. This causes it to come loose, resulting in sand blows. If you're ever in that area, you can still see areas of sand that have been pushed up for these. There's also Indian legends of this fault being active, so it's odd it's been dormant for so long. Story 65. Vacuum decay, a theory that suggests that matter in the universe is not in its lowest, most stable energy state. A single quantum element somewhere in the universe just needs to randomly drop into the lower state to create a cascade of nearby quantum elements to do the same, and so on and so on. This lower state of energy would cause the existing laws of physics in the affected region to change, effectively destroying reality within it. It's possible that this has already happened in more than one place in the universe, but we don't know it because the cascade travels at the speed of light, so there is no warning before the edge of the cascade reaches Earth. Oh, and there's nothing we can do to stop this. Sleep well. Story 66. The cold death of the universe is absolutely unavoidable. Stars will stop shining, and life will cease. Entropy ensures us is an irreversible process. Story 67. When butter goes rancid and it gets that darker yellow tint and off taste, it's because of butyric acid that is being produced. Butyric acid is also produced in a corpse as it putrefies. Story 68. With most food products, once opened, the expiry date is useless. Once exposed to air, it has between 1 to 3 weeks depending on amount of preservatives. That ranch dressing that has been sitting in the fridge for a few months, yeah, that's garbage. Story 69. Plastic. Plastic scares me the most. Just look around you right now. We have reached a point of no return. Look at every aspect. Thing that you use, they're all dominated by plastic. The oil is not just for cars. We are surrounded 24/7 by plastic. We value fake things. We buy superficiality. We sell ourselves for nothing. A1P. Plastic bag has similar composition to the frame of my 500 sunglasses. We are empty. Story 70. Influenza H1N1 virus that caused the 1918 pandemics was synthesized in the lab from DNA remains a few years ago. In fact, it is relatively easy to synthesize any known virus. As they are small, influenza virus is around 9,000 nucleotide pairs. SARS-CoV-2 is 26,000. Any good biolab can work with that. Story 71. Best treatment does not mean what you think it means. Most doctors just follow a protocol. If you have a label, you will be treated like everybody else with that label. Got other complaints? Go see a different doctor. Same thing, protocol. A hospital is a business first. Yes, there are exceptions. Point is, if patients would get the best treatment, only a few patients would get treatment, and the rest would be on an even bigger waiting list. There just are not enough resources and not enough time to do that. Not talking medication, that patients can do by themselves. I'm talking surgery, diagnostics machines, therapy, specialists. Story 72. If Ebola were to ever mutate and become airborne, it could wipe out 50 to 90 of the planet's humans. Edit Ebola Zaire going airborne would spell disaster for humans, not Ebola Reston, which only infects monkeys. Story 73. That you're probably drinking prescription drugs in your tap water. Treatment plants only treat for biological organisms. If you take prescription drugs and them out, there is no way for treatment plants to get them out. I was a training once, and the lecturer was from the University of Michigan. She tested 1,600 municipal water sources, and most tested positive for things like Tylenol and estrogen. Story 74. Well, it seems like the public doesn't know much about this, but antibiotics may become nearly useless by 2050, but there is a way to prevent that by using phages to kill bacteria instead of antibiotics. Story 75. Education standards are slipping so much that we are slowly moving towards an idocracy, maybe not in the lifetime of anyone reading it currently, but in the next 100,200 years if we make it that far, but the effects of this are being felt already. Story 76. The Ogallala Aquifer is expected to be depleted in a few decades. This aquifer supplies water for much of agriculture and livestock in the United States. Story 77. The waste. Holy the amount of waste. I work in biopharma, and there is so much stuff that gets incinerated because it can't be recycled. I one time mislabeled the amount of acid for disposal, and it went from expensive to astronomical in price for sending it out. Our water system sends 80 of water on site to the waste so that the 20 can be considered ready for GMP use. That's a 1,000 L tank that's constantly being drained. I'm not even sure how much goes to waste there, and for crying out loud the amount of paper, so much paper all of it specially disposed of and stored electronic notebooks exist. FFS. Story 78 Children who don't receive enough physical contact affection do not develop correctly or grow to their normal size, and adults who suffered as children from abusive households are often characterized by below average height and weight. Story 79 Oh, I've got one. One of my committee members was an epidemiologist public health guy and studied vector-borne diseases in the Rio Grande Valley. He specialized in viruses, and the mosquitoes there have all sorts of rhabdoviruses, related to rabies.